Good evening, welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now, we're with you to the end. And we hope the end is always a long, long ways away. But in this uncertain time, the end may be getting closer than we think. We're doing a recording tonight. Our simulcast is a little bit out of order, but that doesn't stop us from getting the message out. And getting the message out, we will. There's a lot of interference from time to time in getting out the truth or anything that is a reasonable facsimile thereof. We dig deeper than anybody digs. We come up with goods that nobody else can come up with, and that's clearly obvious in what we do. We also try to teach you to prepare yourselves and be ready for what's going to come, and what's going to come as a hammer blow in probably a 1-2 step punch in the very near future. There was a very large storm in the Gulf of Mexico, Hurricane Isaac, something that was well expected and anticipated, and a lot of people just didn't prepare and get ready, and they suffered for that. Pleas for help went out after many days of being without food and water and being, well, you got a lot of water, a lot of seawater, but being without fresh drinking water or any types of supplies, struggling, begging, pleading for help, and being ignored, because in an event where there are mass survivors or mass amounts of people that have to be rescued, there's no way that there are resources to come to you. You have to be prepared on your own, especially if you know you're in harm's way. The fact that you don't have food and water put away is a death sentence, especially water. You can only last so long without it. It's very, very important for you to have some water readily available or know where to get it to maintain an adequate supply. We talk here about having communications. I've always been very big on having a marine radio. Very simple, very cheap, very effective. Mine goes for months on end without being recharged. It still has a lot of juice in it. Carry it around in the back of the car. It's just a remarkable piece of equipment for way less than $100. So when I hear a help message coming out from Gretna, Louisiana, where people are stranded, and you're on the Gulf, and you're in the sphere of the United States Coast Guard, and you can have a simple radio like that to get in touch with the Coast Guard and tell them where you are and what's wrong, and try to expedite help. It's just insane that you wouldn't have that. We have to expect in the 1-2 punch scenario down the road that we may not have the traditional means of communication that we have. We may not be able to depend on the cell phone grid, and we may not be able to depend on landline telephones. We're going to have a backup plan, whether that's CB radios, marine radios, or something of that nature. It's very, very imperative that you are prepared. The big news today is, of course, the European Currency Board has come through and been given the green light to create money, print money like the Fed, endless amounts of money, and everybody's cheering and whistling over that. The bottom line is, this is a very dangerous situation, because the printing of money, of course, leads to inflation, which can lead to, with too much printing of money, hyperinflation. And that's something that's far more dangerous than a slowdown or a depression even, because hyperinflation can just totally wipe out the value of cash. And that's why it is very imperative for you to have a backup system of finance as well, to be your own bank, to have precious metals, food, fuel, something that's really good to barter, the old black market staples like liquor or cigarettes or something like that. But you have to have something that you can trade to get what you need, the necessities of life, and start up sort of like a backup economy. Very, very important. We also have a little news. We can't say that this is scientifically proven or anything like that, but a lot of people are hearing about West Nile virus. They're worried about West Nile virus. I've been tending to and ministering to a man who may very well have had West Nile virus. He's been very, very sick for the last couple of weeks, and fortunate enough to come under my view, because I don't hesitate to use the essential oils, the godly oils that come from the godly plants that come from the Garden of Eden, and give people these things. So when I see this man who was bitten severely by mosquitoes a couple of weeks ago, suffering from all the classic symptoms of West Nile virus, of course I offer up the prayer remedy, and the essential oil remedy. And in this case, it's one I've used as a staple while in hospital many, many times, curing critical patients of many, many difficult diseases. Hyssop oil. Just say, hey, you're suffering, you're burning with fever, you got a severe headache, and things don't look too good, and you can't get rid of this thing, and the doctors can't give you anything to deal with it. Step up to the plate. So we anoint him with oil, which is an old Christian philosophy that goes way, 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 way back. Upon greeting, we anointed people with oils. There were reasons for that. They were healing oils, healing liniments to cure diseases. As I say, we're taking a shot in the dark because we can't be for certain that you have West Nile virus, and I can't be certain because we have no reason to base this on except faith that we can heal what you have. But doing nothing means you're going to stay sick. Doing something means you have a chance to get better. And wouldn't you know it, within 24 hours when I see the man the next day, he is remarkably improved. No headache, no fever, no chills, getting back to a little normalcy in his life. Another application of the oil here on the neck by the glands to go through your glandular system, to be shot throughout your body so that you can be healed. And a little prayer comes along free with stuff like that. Isn't that amazing? So while most people are living in fear and worrying about what's to come, we close our eyes and our ears and our minds to what is clearly all around us that works. And we found something that may work. So if you're suffering, don't be afraid to acquire the essential oils. And hyssop oil is one of the classic oils from biblical times used to cure diseases of all sorts and descriptions. I call it the nuclear throat lozenge, as it's applied topically at the neck. Something to keep in mind, something to keep in your treasure chest, because the regular system could break down, and to a great extent we don't need it because we have these other things available to us. There's a lot of talk about the planetary alignment that's going to come up, and hopefully Aaron's listening there, good man. This is an artist's rendition of the 3 planets lining up over Giza. This is supposed to happen on December the 3rd. We have Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. This is a popular drawing to attract attention. The actual alignment is going to look something like this, where the Mercury, Venus, and Saturn will be more in a perpendicular angle to the Earth. The Earth is down here in the green. This is the horizon. But a very rare event. The author of this article said this would be the first time in 2,737 years where they'll be like this. There are many other alignments that come along, of course, but it does add a little bit of spice and flavor to the menu of the future and what some of the events hold. A lot of people, especially people who mean to do us harm, look at planetary alignments and solar and stellar alignments as something very, very pertinent to their dark magic or dark beliefs, and we have to be prepared on days like that just in case they want to play the game of human sacrifice or something like that. So that's another thing that this show, compared to many other shows, will do for you to extend your life, your health, and your wealth. Most of the others are just corporate vassals for a big machine that doesn't include us. There was an anniversary last month because we kind of merged our 2 shows here together from last week and this one this week. So we have some, you know, an older story, but it was the anniversary on August the 20th, 75th anniversary of the murder of Trotsky. Trotsky was the fundamental individual in the Russian Revolution that just so turned the world on its tail. But of course, there are no retirement privileges when you work for the New World Order. And even though they acquired Russia and turned it into the Soviet Union and dispatched the Tsar and his family so the monarchy was done with, that was one of the big victories of World I, the old world order, were the monarchies, and they had to be destroyed and replaced. The British monarchy survived, of course, but the Austrian, the Turkish, the German, and the Russian all fell by the wayside and were replaced by a political machine under the control of the New World Order. The divine right of those kings was over. He fell out of favor with Joseph Stalin and eventually fled to Mexico and lived a very well-sheltered life there until Soviet agents attacked and infiltrated and ultimately killed Trotsky with a climbing axe. Sometimes it's called an ice pick, but that's what they mean, not the traditional ice pick you skewer ice with for drinks, but the ice pick you would use in mountain climbing. So the assassin slugged him in the head and he died over the next day from blood loss and severe trauma to the head. But he did win a great victory in capturing Russia from the Tsar. Of course, maybe he had some ideas to make it a better country than Stalin turned it into, and of course his privileges were removed at that point, the breathing privileges, I mean. It's just a terrible way they do business. But he would know where the money went, he would know who got it, he would know the darker machinations of who was behind the revolution, and the fact that they did travel from America through Canada, where they were arrested and then released, traveled across Europe, through Switzerland, through Germany at war, and into Russia as covert agents of probably most likely the Rothschilds. A hell of a story, a hell of an assassination. It's just the history of the world to a great extent is assassination. One of the assassination attempts we had here in Canada, which has taken the world by storm, but which lies deep, deep, deep in recesses, so far underground that no one can understand what they are, was a shooting attempt on the Premier-elect of the province of Quebec, Pauline Marois. She was at her victory celebration and a gunman came up from behind the building. There are reports that he entered, and then there's other reports that are quite contradictory that he did not enter the building, but shots were fired. People were shot, one man was killed, and then the Premier-elect was hustled out of the building. But there's a lot of gray areas around this. The Premier-elect, in her speech, was actually speaking English, and she was part of the Parti Québécois, the sovereigntist movement in Quebec that are very big on French language issues. She was actually speaking in English and addressing the fact that they would honor, to some degree anyway, the English-speaking community and English-speaking rights. When she was hustled off the stage, she said, "What's going on?" She didn't hear the gunshots. She didn't smell the acrid smoke that was coming into the building from the fire that was set. Apparently, in one version of the news, the gunman was led outside where he set a small fire before he was captured. So they're alleging that he actually made it inside. She returned to the stage to talk to her supporters, which seems to be very bizarre if you've had an assassination attempt or a gunman and a building on fire, that you'd actually be returning to the scene of the crime, to the building. It just doesn't make any sense. They said in this article that the man entered the Metropolis Theater just before midnight with a rifle and a handgun and shot 2 people. He was wearing a black ski mask or a balaclava and a blue bathrobe over black clothes. The dead man was a technician at the theater. They say the wounded man was a bus driver who was driving delegates around. I see this as a major attempt to control the Premier-elect. I feel very strongly that she's not exactly part of the New World Order lapdogs, and she had to be put in her place. So we had an operation that was a low-budget, low-key affair, but was serving several purposes. One was to get Canadians to push for more gun control, like most of these other shootings are. One, to scare the Premier into submission. And I based that on her policies here, where she says she's going to tackle the province's large debt, imposing higher tax and royalty rates on mining firms and making foreign takeovers of Quebec companies more difficult. Those are major, major stakes in the heart of big business, especially some of these mining companies which just lay waste to workers' rights and many, many national issues in countries all over the world. People are murdered and killed. There was this big strike in South Africa that we didn't get into because we lost the show last time, where 34 men were shot to death in this giant confrontation with the police. Don't think we're immune from these things here in Canada or anywhere else. So in this other article, they say the victims were shot outside and that one of them was dragged inside and the door was closed afterwards, and then the suspect allegedly set the fire with an incendiary device. The CBC cameraman was there, he saw everything, a lot of pictures were taken, some film. Our Prime Minister Stephen Harper says this individual will face the full force of the law. So we just show how inane our leaders are, how inane our government is. You see, they passed all these, like this tough on crime bill in the last session. And this was supposed to scare everyone into obeying the law. And even a fool should understand that criminals, or most criminals, probably all criminals, do not do a cost-benefit analysis on their crimes. Their crimes of emotion, rage, outrage, desperation, but there's seldom something that's planned out to say, well, I'm not going to do this because now I get this much more time in jail. In fact, for many people, that's almost a badge of honor, especially for the hardcore criminal element. Our NDP leader, I should say just a spokesperson, a member of Parliament, Alexandra Boularice of the NDP, says, when democracy speaks, everyone wins. When guns speak, the opposite is true. That's true and not true, because these people have absolutely no knowledge of guns except that they hate them. So when guns speak, we don't get democracy. Well, tell that to the Americans in the Revolutionary War. Tell that to the countries of liberated Europe after they were occupied by Nazi Germany. Sometimes, as bad and as awful as it is, guns do speak, and they have to speak to liberate people to democracy or to freedom. They're just tools. They didn't have all that many guns in the English Civil War. They were rather antique and obsolete by today's standards, but gunpowder, firearms, cannon, shot, and shell were used in the English Civil War to liberate us from the Inquisition, to liberate us from the divine right of kings, and to bring this in. Well, you just couldn't go up and say, you know, King, I just think it should be that way. You would be dragged away, tortured, and killed. But that didn't stop the next one, or the next one, or the next one. And that's where our government is just so out of touch with the human mind and the human soul. We will, even at the expense of death or pain, strive for what we think is a better world. The dysfunctional will do the same for their ill-gotten desires. And no amount of punishment or threat of punishment is going to change that. So that's where they're just way off in a field somewhere with a complete lack of understanding. This was also going to serve as like a springboard for the police to go after social media groups to look for people who say things that are politically untoward or just downright stupid, but hardly a threat to society. The Quebec provincial police are going to take over the investigation from the Montreal police, and that just kind of shows to some degree that there may be more cover-up involved, where these officers are outside of the loop of the local authorities, the local police commission, the local citizenry, maybe a little closer at a high level to the military, the intelligence services, or the military-industrial complex, as we like to call it. This individual who was arrested Richard Henri Bain, was previously under the eyes of the police for one reason or another. He was very talkative when he made his arrest, screaming and yelling all sorts of things. The reactions in this metropolis meeting place were just bizarre. People saying nothing has happened. A PQ spokesman, somebody just let off a noisemaker. Marwa returned to tell people to get out. She was unaware that someone had been killed. You know, she's the premier-elect. Somebody just tried to assassinate her. She is the head of the civil government of the province of Quebec. The Quebec provincial police are her responsibility. No one tells her. So while she's on stage, they come out with the yellow tape and put it around and label it off as a crime scene. And then the faithful pile out, and by the time they pile out, well, now cordons and cordons of police are there to intimidate and show a tough frame of mind to these delegates. Very, very strange. Some of the quotes that are in the news: instead of rushing into the main hall, the attacker paused to start a fire. Very, very strange. It's like he's calling attention to himself instead of fulfilling the job. That's why I look at this as more as a threat to the premier. The fire was said to be very, very large, necessitating the evacuation of other nearby buildings, but they didn't properly evacuate the building that was on fire, which is just totally goes against the grain of any safety plans anywhere in the civilized world. There were a lot of comments during the election that were violent, where people are very, very angry with the previous Liberal government of Jean Charest. Threats were made about dumping his body in a trunk of a car, like Pierre Laporte many long years ago in the FLQ crisis and such like that. And I think we can see in the future, as the pressure mounts and the system falls apart, there's going to be a lot of pressure on a lot of our politicians from angry people. And then there's the lunacy mob, the gun control activists who come out and say right away, oh, see, it's a matter of gun control. So one comedian comes forward who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, but he says, see, Stephen Harper's Tories took away the gun registry and that's why this has happened. The gun registry was never taken away in Quebec. It was still functioning. So if you're basing your philosophy on the fact that the gun registry prevents murder and crime, you're an idiot. Because the gun registry is still in force in Quebec, even now today as we speak, because the Quebec government sued the federal government, and this thing is slowly winding through the courts. And Quebec wants to flex its muscles and just show that, you know, you can't tell us what to do. A fool's paradise. So we have some pictures on the blog, because we look at this very, very differently. Bain, the Dark Knight Rises, and Quebec shooting, because of course this chap's name is Bain, and the whole crux of bizarre shootings involve this Batman film, and that Bain, B-A-N-E, is the nefarious character in the Dark Knight Rises. Quebec, Montreal, is the home of MK Ultra. Dr. Ewan Cameron practiced at McGill, Dr. Dmitry Pivnicki. There's a link here about a video from Ireland about Dr. Ewan Cameron. The internet is being cleansed to some degree. This was a psychological operation. This man, as I read in the morning newspaper, had been seeing a doctor, a psychiatrist in Montreal to deal with mental health issues. So I see this in today's Toronto Sun, and I go, oh, that's great. I want that link for this article I'm going to write. And then when I click on all these versions, it changes automatically. It's gone. And it's replaced with a sanitized article about Marwa and Quebec politics. But there's nothing in there about Bain and talking about his previous mental disorders and the fact that he's seeing a psychiatrist. Now, with this glorious gun law and these glorious registrations, you have a man coming to a psychiatrist who's right off the wall, perhaps, and the police have found he owned 20 registered firearms and one that may not have been. And there's no cry of alarm or worry from this psychiatrist to say that my patient has lost it. Nothing. Or is this doctor, because of the cleansing of the news on the internet, part of the MK Ultra program, start teaching this man about the fact that he is Bane, the superhero, the supervillain, who's going to attack not Gotham City, but Superman's city, Metropolis, for whatever reason. So here we have the theater, Metropolis, where this event happened. We see the Twilight language exposed, where this policeman's finger is pointing at the word accept on the marquee. This is the Twilight language. Twilight language is saying that the premier-elect, Marwa, is being forced to accept something she doesn't want. And that goes back to a lot of her policies about taxing big corporations. This is the premier being hustled off the stage by her security detail. And it's just typical, something you generally only see in movies, but you don't see in the news. Classic application. She is terrorized and made fearful and put under the control of the New World Order, because they can at all times make reference and inference to the fact that the dark night will rise again. This is our suspect, Mr. Bain, Richard Henry Bain. Classic photograph. CBC was very, very lucky to get right on top of the situation. So unlike the Aurora shooting, where there are no pictures from inside, this is very well photographed for a political or propaganda purpose, to show that Mr. Bain, who's been identified as the owner of a hunting and fishing lodge, is like that. That is your typical Canadian hunter, sports shooter, and hobbyist. A deranged lunatic, snarling and growling at the cameraman. This is a picture of him being arrested and hauled away, to give us some idea of what he looked like at the time. Then we have to ask questions. Many, many questions. Like, you're in a secure area where a political leader is. The building should be locked up and sealed off. There should be a cordon of police around the building. Here's a man wearing a balaclava, which is illegal now in Quebec. After the student protest, they passed a law to say you can't wear a mask. He's wearing a giant blue bathrobe, it's described as. And on the way in, he's carrying a rifle. That's kind of hard to miss. And a pistol, and an incendiary device or two. And he growls and snarls a lot. How did you miss him? When he first comes in contact with some decent people, the person who worked for the promotion company, the bus driver, and another man, they instantly see that this man is a deranged killer. And they took actions that resulted in their deaths to stop him from getting into this Metropolis building and killing Madame Marwa. Heroes and then some. For people who don't understand MK Ultra, this is a picture, classic picture from the early experiments in MK Ultra. This is a child, 8 to 10 years old, who had her memory erased, had her memory just destroyed to the point of being an infant. This is what they are prepared to do. In the Canadian example, a wife of a member of Parliament was actually used in the experiments by Dr. Ewan Cameron. Just people going for normal medical, psychiatric care were put into this chamber of horrors. So we see, with one fell swoop, the propaganda machine has lambasted hunters, political activists, shooters, in just one fell swoop, to say you're all right off the rails, deranged, and we have to have control over you so that we can build a better new world order. It's absolutely disgusting. Dick Cheney, in an article I have here from 2009, came up with a CIA black ops that was so black it could never be revealed, not even to the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate. When Mr. Panetta took over the CIA, he instantly stopped this program and reported it. It was just so dark, so dire. Of course, it can never be brought to the light of day, not even to these committees. And no one in the CIA will discuss it, and neither will Cheney. So we just have to guess at what it is. And my guess would be, of course, that it is MK Ultra. It is MK Ultra that goes so far as to be like an assassination or death type of plot. Something you see in The Killing Room, that documentary movie that I talk about all the time, which is just very, very dark and evil, but very, very necessary to understand so that we can put these evil monsters in the spotlight and shut these things down. In Mexico, last week, 12 Mexican police are being held for going after a U.S. diplomatic vehicle. Luckily for them, armor-plated, where they just opened fire and ambushed on this vehicle with 2 U.S. government employees of some sort. It's speculation that they're CIA, and a naval captain from the Mexican Navy. Were they fighting over drugs? Were they fighting over many, many things? It's difficult to say, because of course we'll never be told, we'll never be put in the loop. We just have to do what we can to try to understand what's going on. One of the other stories we were going to do, you know, for last week as well, is this assassination plot on the president. We had a bunch of American soldiers, active duty soldiers, in a basically you know, murder for hire type of scenario, where they were going to try to overthrow the American government and kill the president. Of course, that's not news in the modern era for some strange reason. It is news now that they're being court-martialed. These are the individuals here: Private Salmon, Private Burnett, Private Aguji, Sergeant Payton, were led away in handcuffs from the Long County Sheriff's Office in December when they were arrested. Fortunately, they were arrested by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation the following day after they murdered this chap, Michael Rourke, and his girlfriend Tiffany York. They were lured to a remote spot, shot. Their bodies ended up in the water. They were found by fishermen. They were murdered December the 4th. Their bodies were found December the 5th. The arrestees were from Fort Stewart in Georgia. The military has charged them now, so they've removed them from the public courts. These were the weapons they were buying. They spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $87,000, so it gives you some idea of what our Aurora shooter should have been spending from his student council funds to buy all this artillery. They started an anarchist group called Fear, Forever, Enduring, Always Ready. Apparently, one of these guys had murdered his wife to collect a $500,000 insurance policy. They bought land in Washington State and weapons in this plot. They were going to, you know, attack many, many places, including their own military base, which is quite a trick because the military have guns and way more of them. So that would have been an interesting thing. They were going to go after Forsyth Park Fountain, other Savannah, Georgia targets, a Washington State dam, and poison the apple supply and kill the president maybe on the way to or fro. But bear in mind, there was an old Army War College plan to assassinate the president in 2012. Are they part of it? Were they part of it? The officer who wrote that plan was promoted and retired as a major general, as I recall. But we also have to wonder that there were other plotters, they say, that got away. And there were 4 of them. And some of these whack teams that we've heard about, like in the Sikh Temple shooting, or especially with other shooters involved in Aurora, is that we have people that are in assassination type squads and teams going around the United States. Were they one of them? Did they get caught prematurely or in advance? That is entirely possible. And what happened to the other ones? Is this part of Cheney's secret plan to advance the New World Order in his own unique way? Then, of course, in the intervening times, we haven't seen too many of them since the Olympics. I guess I don't do Comrade Google too much justice, because we keep exposing the finer meanings. Maybe they're not even intended meanings of the doodle, because the twilight language just speaks, and there's nothing that they can do to stop it. So as they reveal things, even in jest, they reveal like the deep, dark machinations of their soul to those who can read it. So this is the Maria Montessori Google Doodle. It's an educational doodle because Maria Montessori started a whole new system of education for young people. Montessori schools are all over the place. In fact, both Google founders Larry Page and Sergey Brin attended Montessori schools. But this one's unique in the fact that Maria is not in the doodle. There's just a bunch of symbols and objects. So it seems rather cold, but there's a message in there, and it's not Maria. Although Maria was the first medical doctor graduate in Italy, that was a milestone. She fell out of favor with Mussolini and the fascists and had to leave Italy. Maybe she's fallen out of favor with the military-industrial complex that Google is part of even today. The first image is that little blue square with a G in it. And of course, one of the most popular little blue squares on the internet is the Facebook one. And GF, of course, are my initials. On a BlackBerry, a blue square can signify means to change frequency. So maybe the New World Order is changing its frequency. A blue square is the standard Facebook logo. Facebook is an intelligence gathering operation. It is designed to help the intelligence agencies gather information on you, because you voluntarily put personal information up for them to confiscate. There's an investment company called the Blue Square Group, and in light of the economic situation, that could be very pertinent. The red triangle is the most ominous. The Nazis used the red triangle for political prisoners, liberals, communists, trade unionists, royalists, social democrats and socialists, Freemasons and anarchists. Well, it don't leave too many people left. And we approach the denouement of the New World Order plot, we will find many people so labeled. So are they telling us that the NDAA and the establishment of FEMA camps, that its time is nigh? Of course, the Red Triangle was also a fictional circus group in Batman Returns. The whole concept of Batman has been seconded to the development of a demonic cult possession. Mass killing sprees are commonplace. So the psychiatrists in MK Ultra use this over and over again. And this is the Red Triangle of a Polish prisoner, Jerzy Kowalski. The yellow square, part of the Microsoft logo, is placed within the blue circle, and we had both of those in the doodle. Microsoft Corporation is another high-level government contract organization. They developed the back door for all Windows operating systems to allow the intelligence agencies into your personal life, your personal space, without telling you, of course, because they're building this budding prison planet. Two blue circles on the iPhone prevent the user from turning it off. You are under the control of the machines. You are not in control of them. And that's very important, because they use these phones to track and monitor you. They can turn on all the speakers, microphones, cameras at their leisure and download anything they want from you in the privacy of your own home. The beads that are in this doodle are also very unique, because there's 5 light blue ones, 9 blue ones, and 3 yellow ones. So you get 593. We were talking about the USS Thresher as part of Bob Ballard's secret research at the bottom of the ocean. That's the pennant number for that submarine, 593. Mr. Allen and his personal yacht Octopus are exploring off Iceland, allegedly looking for the bell of HMS Hood. 593 is also the country code for Ecuador, a country putting Julian Assange on the international stage. And at the end of the doodle, we have the Rubik's Cube. which came long after Maria, is used. Basically, it's an algorithm, which is the mainstay of the modern world. Investments are driven by algorithms. They will crash with their misuse. Is that on the horizon? Paul Allen is also dumping major real estate holdings. He's selling his Amazon building complex in Seattle. There are 11 buildings comprising 1.8 million square feet of space. That's 9/11. The cube is falling apart. The rats know what to do. Get off the ship. Red square in the cube. Of course, Moscow's Red Square is the most famous. There's a red square at the University of Washington. The fireworks await the season finale. And of course, Madame Montessori is on the Italian banknote, the 1,000 lira banknote. Does that symbolize the end of the euro and a return to national currencies in the doodle? And if we are reading their mail that accurately, it's no wonder they don't do as many doodles as they've done in the past. And of course, one of the other terrible tragedies has been this Republican convention, where delegates were just pretty much pushed out of the way. 6 ways from Sunday. Ron Paul was not given a chance to speak, even though he would lose more than likely in a contest with Romney as it was set up to this day. They don't want anyone to know the truth about banking, the truth about the debt, the truth about the Federal Reserve, the truth about anything. And I guess, see here, let me play this little video. GOP establishment fears Ron Paul. And we'll let them
Steve, thanks
say
so much.
it.
The Republican National Convention kicks off in 4 days in Tampa. And just in time for the convention, an entire state's delegates are replaced by the RNC. It's a story that we've been following for 6 months. Tonight, Ben has the reality check that you won't see anywhere else.
Only a few days before the Republican Party holds its convention in Tampa. We've been following the delegate process for months, almost to the point of exhaustion, and yet no one else will do it. For months, we've also told you how the RNC just won't follow its own rules. Well, now that we're days away, the final attempts to control every aspect of that convention have fallen into place. The biggest fear for the RNC is that the appearance at the convention will be that 100% of the delegates don't want Mitt Romney. The only problem is they don't. Whether you like them or not, almost 20% of the delegates who will be in Tampa next week don't support Romney. Nearly 20% support Congressman Ron Paul, others support Rick Santorum, and still others Newt Gingrich. But the delegates who support Santorum or Gingrich have no ability to cause problems because of the RNC's 5-state rule. You see, under that rule, a delegate must have a plurality of delegates from 5 states in order to have their name nominated from the convention floor. As I've told you, unlike Gingrich and Santorum, Congressman Paul has that plurality. The majority of delegates in Maine, Minnesota, Nevada, Iowa, and Virginia are Paul supporters. He also had a majority in Oregon and Louisiana, plus a large group of 17 delegates from Massachusetts. Now, as I've told you, the RNC for months has been stripping those delegates of their credentials. The Massachusetts 17, as they're called, removed. The entire Louisiana Liberty delegation removed. Oklahoma not seated because the RNC Rules Committee allowed the state to break its own rules. The same thing happened in Oregon. But even after continuously breaking their own rules and stripping so many states of these delegates, the RNC came up short. The 5-state rule was still a problem because a plurality of 5 states was still intact. Again, Maine, Minnesota, Iowa, Nevada, and Virginia. So what to do? Well, just change the rules. You see, this week, the RNC Rules Committee tried to take care of their 5-state problem by changing the 5-state rule. A motion was made in the Rules Committee to increase the number of states from 5 to 10. But the motion failed by 1 vote. What was changed, delegates must indicate in writing at least 1 hour before the vote who they intend to nominate. By the way, it was a Republican committeeman from Virginia who fought against that change, saying it was unfair to change the rule just to prevent Ron Paul's name from being placed into nomination after he'd already won 5 states. So that didn't work. Instead, the RNC decided to take another extraordinary step. In this case, the RNC decided to go back and reinstate some of those Liberty delegates, actually give them back their seats from states where they had stripped them of their credentials. The Massachusetts 17, this week, 11 of them were reinstated. In Louisiana, 27 of the 46 had been Liberty delegates. Well, the RNC this week reinstated 17 of them. That's good news, right? But if the RNC is going to give a little, it's also going to take a little, like the delegation from Maine. As of today, all but 5 of Maine's 48 delegates and alternates may not be seated. The RNC Committee on Contests is recommending to the full RNC complete invalidation of the Maine Convention and the decertification of the Maine delegation. The RNC is only planning to seat the state party chairman, the national committeeman, the national committeewoman, Governor Paul LePage, and his wife, Mrs. LePage. Rather than allowing Republicans in Maine, though, to choose the replacements, the Rules Committee is also recommending that the RNC break one more rule and simply appoint a new Maine delegation. So what you need to know? The delegates from Maine who were elected to those spots by voters in Maine are heading to Tampa no matter what the RNC says, and they say they're going to fight for those spots. But the bigger issue here, again, why have rules if you don't follow them? Why does the RNC even have a 5-state rule if a candidate gets 5 states and then they want to change it to a 10-state rule? And then when that doesn't work, they just remove delegates, an entire state's worth of delegates, and replace them with people who will do what they say. Because at the end of the day, that's all that either party really seems to be interested in. And that is Reality Check.
If you would like to make your voice heard on this story, you can head over to Ben's Facebook page. You can find
Yes, and that is reality. That is the reality of life. This is just a giant illusion, the fact that we live in a free society. The shadow government controls the Republicans and the Democrats. They have to work harder. In Canada, we have a couple of more parties, so they have to control the Parti Québécois, the Bloc, the Liberals, the Conservatives, the NDP. They got a lot more work in their hands, and to a great extent, perhaps even the Green Party. That's why it is just imperative for you as an individual to vote for the most nondescript, back to basics commoner you can find. They will have no budget. They'll not be allowed to attend any debates. The only reason you will know they exist may be the fact that when you go to vote, their names are on the ballot, and you will see a party perhaps that you've never heard of before and a name you do not know. That's the only hope you have. There are relatively large, decent parties in the United States, like the Constitution Party, Libertarians, and such. If you see candidates from them, you are morally compelled to get out of this paradigm. It's the only non-violent way you have is the ballot box. So they fixed the main party so that you cannot get a decent individual to be running for a major position. One of the rules specifically is they came up with a Rule 15, presidential candidates would be given the power to disallow or remove delegates elected under state party rules or state law. Now, what type of freedom or democracy or Republican style of government is that? And they came up with another one that's even more encompassing. Rule 12 would enable the RNC chairman to enact almost any rule changes he or she desired. And as this writer points out, they already have power of the purse, the control of the finances of the party. That's more than enough power for these leaders to have. But of course, you have the ultimate power as the chooser to get out of the box, to get out of the paradigm and get away from these parties. These parties are going to take us down the drain if you let them. Coal miners in Ohio were said they were forced to go to this Romney love-in. They were forced to contribute money to the party. They weren't paid for time that they were forced to take off from work because their management were going to go to this Romney love-in. The coffee burns on the stove. No one has the insight or foresight to turn off the heat and switch to something else. I see some ominous clouds on the horizon with Romney and some of the things that are going to come up based on some of the intelligence we get. So that's why I wrote this blog called The Sunset Clause, and I was able to find the perfect image to go with it from a movie or something that's coming out called Evict Us, about the end of Obama, which is a play on words for Invictus, another film and a classic old poem. But I don't like what I see, don't like it one bit. So I feel it's been decided that Mitt Romney will be president. And I believe that will be a horrendous outcome, because Mitt Romney is a disciple of Benjamin Netanyahu. In his summer tour of Israel, we have a link here to Haaretz article that Netanyahu controlled Romney's itinerary, and that's pretty mild stuff. They go back to working together for Bain Capital, and we have Romney's own quote here: "We, Mitt and Netanyahu, can almost speak in shorthand. We share common experiences and have a perspective and underpinning which is similar." Of course, Netanyahu claims he hardly knows the guy. They just worked together once, so we have two habitual liars doing their best. But it does show the treachery of the rigged Republican race, the exclusion of the natural leader, Ron Paul, who probably with a fair chance could have been a contender in the election, and a way out of the financial Armageddon that's planned, because they're going to plan this to, in my opinion, ruin Obama. If the economy drops out in the latter half of October, there's absolutely no way in hell John Q. Public is going to vote for Obama. He'll be lucky to get out of town alive. So that makes Romney a shoo-in. He'll come in as a so-called savior. And then I don't hesitate to put where I think our savior will be. This is a rendition, a comical rendition, really, of the nuclear button. That is the election issue, because if Romney gets elected, he has publicly stated that he will second military decisions to Netanyahu. Netanyahu will pull his strings like a puppet and get control of and use the American military to get into a protracted war with Iran, which could lead us into a protracted struggle, or even a short and fast struggle in a real Armageddon with Russia and or China. Syria is compelled by treaty to fight for and with Iran if they're attacked. The Russians have a major naval base in Syria. These two countries are squeezing in on Russian space. China is probably one of the main customers of Iran to get oil, as are some of the other non-aligned countries. This is just pushing it a little too far. Maybe Iran will get a nuke in the near future. They probably won't want to kill you if you're nice to them, but as sure as shooting, the Russians already have this nuclear inventory that can virtually lay waste to Europe and the United States. China just warned the United States about some of the things that are going on in the South China Sea, where they're getting very expansionist and wanting to take over a lot of territory that may have assets for oil. This oil is going to be like the last drop of water to be fought over on this planet. They're not going to back down. No one will. This is taking us almost to a point of biblical Armageddon if we get this turkey in. Not that the other turkey's any better, they're both turkeys. But one of the things that shows that the election has been fixed is there are supposed to be emissaries from the Obama side that are looking for a new home for him, and this is a rendition of one of the homes in Hawaii. Effective move-in date January, after Romney takes over the presidency. The Obama Library will be set up at the University of Hawaii. This will be in very close proximity, and if this is in fact true, this tells us that they already know they're throwing in the towel and moving on. This estate was used in the film of the Hawaii Five-O genre. There's a lot of good text in this book, Go Quietly or Else. It's the biography of Spiro Agnew, former Vice President of the United States. Made it very clear in one chapter that he was told to vacate the office, or he would be killed. They tried to destroy him by taking him through the courts on some minor charges that he was involved in some misappropriations as a county commissioner or something like that. But it's quite a good book, and you're getting first-hand information from someone who was there. Frank Sinatra was bankrolling Agnew to help him with some of his legal expenses because he wasn't a really rich man. And then, of course, the joke is Clint Eastwood was at the convention chastising Obama. He was in the movie Invictus. Some strange coincidence. The poem by William Ernest Hensley goes back some period of time, and I included it here because it is quite inspirational and just classic American literature, something that shouldn't be forgotten. And while we're on the subjects of elections, somebody sent me something that was very, very shocking. This is a commercial from the Catholic Church about voting. And I think you'll understand, if you understand any of the prophetic books of the Bible or Revelation, this should send shivers through your timbers. Okay, to stand the test of the fire is just a awesome, ominous message to put across. Of course, the test of the fire is the fire of the apocalypse, the fire of the end of it all. So we see the Catholic Church telling us in no uncertain terms that there are things that are going to be forged in the fire. We see the blacksmith in this commercial forging the letters of the policies of the government, policies on marriage, life, and freedom at the very end. These are policies that I do not disagree with the Church on in any way, shape, or form. But I look at this as more a warning about the biblical consequences as opposed to the vote. As we see the woman coming out of the ballot place, she's not happy, she's not smiling, she's not exercised her right to control the mechanisms of state as a citizen in a free land. She looks very pressured, tired, and worn, because the system is rigged. The game is fixed. Of the two major parties that they have a pick to vote for, both of them are on the same side of evil. You can have a left New World Order or a right New World Order, but you're going to have a New World Order unless you take the initiative to start picking some of those other names. And that's the only way you're going to get your butt out of the fire that they have planned for you. There was a speaker making the rounds on Blog Talk Radio. He was supposed to be talking about the electromagnetic pulse. You know, something that I'm an expert on in any way, shape, or form. And there's some facets of it that you just don't think about. This only takes one discharge of one weapon high in the air over Chicago or the Midwest that takes out a good portion of North America's electronics. Things that we take for granted: lights, air conditioners, refrigerators, microwaves, cell phones, computers, ATM machines, contain microprocessors or require electricity to power these things, which could stop instantly. Things like running water, electricity, or natural gas stop flowing. And it could take years to put all that infrastructure back together again. Because when you figure you pop every chip, trillions of chips, who's going to put them all back together in any reasonable period of time? And then something I didn't really think about, but something just like our cars that have all these chips, so do airplanes. So what are you going to do when thousands of airplanes lose their control mechanisms and just start falling out of the sky in one fell swoop? Then of course one that we do take into account is the automobile. Everybody's got all these newfangled, wonderful, super duper automobiles that have nothing but chips in them, and when they all fry, they just stop working. So your $50, $60, $70, $80, $100,000 car just becomes a pile of junk that's going to have to be bulldozed off the highway because it's blocking the road. How many of them will lose control and crash? How many thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of collisions will result as of that moment? And how far away are you going to be from home? Are you prepared to walk the miles, tens of miles, hundreds of miles to get back? And that's something just on a basic level I try to make sure everybody understands. Have a good pair of boots or shoes handy, baby, because it just might be you and what God gave you to get around. And it don't hurt to have a little extra food or water even in your vehicle. I always carry a couple of canteens, use them a lot while I'm hiking, but by the same token, if I'm stranded at the side of the road for a while, a couple of canteens full of water will keep me going for a while, at least until hopefully I can get home or get some more. Cell phones aren't going to work. Maybe a lot of the radios aren't going to work if they're more modern and up to date. There's no way to call 911, no way to get in touch with authorities. You're on your own. There is no cash, there's no money, because virtually everything runs on electricity. No debit cards, no credit cards. Maybe in a little bit of time some owners will be taking cash. This electromagnetic pulse thing would be a nightmare. An unimaginable nightmare. As we move into the economy, while I was talking to a good supporter of the show who helps me a lot with office supplies and takes a little bit of the edge off, like I'm still using photocopy paper that, you know, oh, I should be set up until December when she buys me a case of this stuff and drops it off on my lap. Little things, but they go a long way. And you know, this is a bare bones operation. We appreciate anything and everything you can do because this is what keeps it going very much. You know, whether you donate through PayPal or you want to send some payment through the snail mail to the station. You know, we desire, need, and thrive on this. It is very difficult to do this without some help. If you're of a personal mind to believe in alternative media and freedom of speech, just even helping that media network with any type of cash donation of any sort is money well spent to keep the rent paid, the bills paid, the lights on, and keep it functioning. See, we're not shills for the CIA. We don't get support from black ops. We're not the vassals of the large corporations that want to destroy you. So they're not going to dump a whole lot of money in here. In fact, they probably wouldn't dump any money in here. A lot of it depends on you. This is a team effort. The people at that channel do a lot of hard work to get this out to you. I do a lot of hard work to get this out to you. And even if this is the only show you watch on this network, we all depend on each other, and anything you can do, even at a small level, multiplied by 10, 15, or 20 people, is a big help and blessing. And a lot of people do take the initiative from time to time. Don't let it stop. Everything depends on you. When you need heroes, look in the mirror. You're it. It's all we got. And whether we succeed or fail will depend on what we've done. And if we don't do enough and we fail, they haven't invented the time machine yet that they've told us that we can come back and do it again and try harder next time. We'll have to live through it. As things are going on in Greece right now, a story that isn't getting the major press because of the stigma involved, is the police are fighting the police. Because the police now have to take these austerity packages, so the police have barricaded the riot police in their building, and the riot police have to come out so they can bash the heads of the public. So there's some pretty hefty scuffles going on. And then the riot police are saying, how do I fight my brother to go to work? But where they miss it a little bit is it's not just the other police that are their brothers. The other Greek citizens are your brothers and sisters too. And that's where you allowed yourself to get in this position, is they divided you, and when they divide you, they can conquer you. And as the subdivisions become smaller and smaller, you end up having to fight the brother that is actually right next to you, as opposed to someone who's 3 or 4 jobs away from you. The real enemy is the shadow government, the banksters, who have forced all this down your throats and divided you and conquered you. That's the enemy. But because you haven't understood that, you keep going down and down and down and down and losing more and more and more and more. And like rats fighting for the last scrap of bread. We're going to have to come to the day when we have to face the fact that we may have to exist without money and payment. And we only do things because it's the right thing to do until we can build a system back up again. That's going to take some initiative. I used to teach my children that when they were small. I didn't give them like a regular allowance. You would do what was right. You would get a reward, but it wasn't done like you were teaching a dog, sit, I give you a biscuit. I expect something long-term from you, or sometimes you have to struggle and work hard for a period of weeks, months, or even years to get that reward. But because you don't get the bone right away like the dog, doesn't mean you just lie there and do nothing. In a review of a classic old book from Barbara Tushman, one that I really loved was The March of Folly, which is just the classic example of what we're getting into, going off the cliff in our folly. But another one was The Guns of August. And in this book, she brought forward the fact that European intellectuals and leaders overestimated the power of free trade. These individuals believed that the interconnection of European nations due to this trade would stop a continent-wide war from breaking out, as the economic consequences would be too great. However, this assumption was incorrect. For example, she noted that Moltke when warned of such consequences, refused to even consider them in his plans, arguing that he was a soldier and not an economist. And this is what Europe will face. This whole free trade confound that they've put together is actually destroying us. And that's part of the march of folly, because they keep doing what's wrong and not correcting it. And we will pay dearly for this, maybe even in weeks. And then everyone will understand. It's just we're going to have a hell of a time getting out of the soup. As we said, the European Central Bank has been given Fed powers to create a money supply so we can have hyperinflation sooner or later. The Federal Reserve in this article says they're going to crash markets before QE3, and I think that's probably got a lot to do with getting rid of Obama. They want to crash the markets. The FOMC is having a meeting September 12th and 13th to get out the good news. Volatility could move off the charts, maybe extreme volatility to the downside. Stock prices are no longer a useful signal to Fed officials. Should the Fed disappoint its September policy meeting, the risk of a stock sell-off is high, Merrill Lynch analysts wrote to their clients August 21st. Spain's fiscal outlook is terrible. Many of the European countries are terrible. The European Central Bank is buying their bonds, which are basically junk bonds, and then to feed the process, they sell good bonds to try to recoup some of their losses. But these are poisoned and dead assets. They're not anything you can really hold on to or take to the bank as a joke. This is leaving us wide open. Credit to Mobile has been guaranteed its assets by France. This is like a mortgage bank. They used to pay out 1.75 billion euros, 1.4 billion pounds in October, and the winding up of the group is the most likely outcome. The French government will back it up, which is ultimately meaning the French taxpayer. Article in the British press, the Bank of Granny and Granddad goes bust, pensioner insolvencies at a record high. No one's making any money because the interest rate is close to zero. So any annuities or investments that seniors have put aside aren't paying out any money. But part of it is their own fault too. I see this happening. For what money we have here in Canada, we have different things. Like my pension money's locked in until I'm 65, so that goes down the sewer. There's nothing much I can do about that. But for something we have called RRSPs, retirement savings plans, like if you can get anything out of the bank, get it out of the bank. I've done that. Convert it to gold or silver, real estate, art. Pick something that you think might be valuable, put it away. It may be a means of retaining value, but especially with the precious metals, if the bottom drops out, that these things will become the only suitable money to maintain. In fact, there was a funny article in the business section in an Indian paper, as I recall, where they just talked about how stupid gold and silver is and how it can't get to $1,800, and if it does, it can't stay there, and the whole world's going to fall around precious metals, all the typical lies. So I read this, then I get to the very last paragraph, and then it says, but of course, if there's a loss of confidence in the dollar, that'll turn around instantly and gold will just go to the moon. The last paragraph is all you needed to read. When these paper currencies fail, they're only paper. Canada's new stuff's out now, these new coins that are made out of steel, they're worthless. They're changing all the machines to take these new coins because the old ones are going to be taken back and melted down. They have copper and zinc in them, which are precious metals, even cheap precious metals, but they have value and substance. In a hyperinflationary sphere, the 13 cents of precious metals that used to be in a Canadian dollar coin could aspire to be worth $1, $2, or $3 through inflation. And the coin would have value, but now it's just steel, it's worthless. Even with hyperinflation, it'll still be worthless. We'd have to get to Zimbabwe inflation before it would have any intrinsic value. This article, is there going to be a stock market crash this fall? The perfect storm. It's all set up. QE3 will come in printing trillions of new dollars. The ECB, not in this article, will be printing their up to trillions of euros. Will we be facing it? I would say we're very, very close. We're talking about Morgan Stanley falling on its sword this fall. Dennis Gartman, publisher of the Gartman letter, dumped all his stocks. We talked about George Soros before. He's dumped a lot of his banking stocks. Europe is a full cycle ahead of the US. Its governments and its banks are both bankrupt. It's a couple of drunks standing on the street corner, holding each other up at this point. Europe is in much worse shape than the US. It's highly regulated, highly taxed, and much more socially unstable. Europe is going to be the epicenter of the coming storm. Japan is waiting in the wings, as is China. This is going to be a worldwide phenomenon. Southern Europe is facing depression-like conditions as we speak. World Bank, or former World Bank economist Richard Duncan, I guess you can't keep a job if you tell the truth. The explosion in credit drove economic growth in the US and around the world, and now that's the only thing keeping us from collapsing in a debt deflation spiral. What I think everybody needs to understand is that the kind of economy that we have now is not capitalism. It has very little in common with capitalism. Capitalism was an economic system in which the government played very little role. Under capitalism, gold was money, and the government had nothing to do with it. Now the central bank creates the money and manipulates its value. I guess that's why he's a former economist with the World Bank. He told the truth. And the truth is what will set us free and keep us going. One individual I came across in my reading of a great book called Savage Peace, and that's it there. This lady is an awesome author. As I slowly mull through this and look at the past and feel how lucky we are, the most recent chapter I've been reading is the fact that they had a 9/11 back in 1919, June the 2nd, I believe it was, the R Street explosion. They had a bomber blow up the home of the Attorney General. He lived across the street from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was Undersecretary of the Navy. Roosevelt was walking home with his wife. His child was home when the explosion tore through his home as well. It was a massive bomb. His son was just covered in broken glass. I don't recall ever getting that lesson in my history. The big thing was it was just, another 9/11. Some patsy set up to blow up this guy's house to create a crisis. The solution is a police state. The government has to take over anything. If you think George Bush and his Patriot Act or anything difficult, this was 1,000 times worse. But they don't teach us these false flag operations. The funny thing was there was some instructors from the RAND school in New York City who clearly stated at the time that the only person, Key Bono, who could benefit from this attack would be the government, and they have to be the perpetrators of the attack. There's no way any of these accused groups at that time, the Bolsheviks, could have been behind this, because it destroys their power base in the country and subjects them to cruel and harsh treatment by the state and possible imprisonment, definite deportation, and a good old-fashioned beating. Very wise words. And then mentioned in there was Ernst Freund, University of Chicago Faculty of Law. He made some very great statements, along with some other people at the time, to stand up to the tyranny. And I guess it's in my blood somehow that we have to stand up to this tyranny and say something. Maybe that's why we don't get it as bad. This gentleman was a hero in World War I, Sergeant Henry Johnson. He only had one problem: he was black. So he didn't get any medals from the United States. Bill Clinton gave him his medals. He died in 1929, penniless. He was in a ticker tape parade in New York City. He was adored from coast to coast. And then he spoke the truth, and he was marginalized and forgotten. But he did get the Croix de Guerre from France and other medals from the French for basically saving them from an occupation by Germany. Of course, in this book they talk about President Wilson, the smiling fool here, as he goes to France after the war to establish the League of Nations. There's the League of Nations symbols. We're not too used to seeing it because that's long before my time. But you see the double pentagram inside the pentagram, or pentagon. It's just the devil incarnate, this whole system, to build a world government. He just said he wouldn't tell the people what he was really doing. That he's signing away the sovereignty of the United States, surrendering it to a universal international power under the control of the international banksters. And that's just left out for you. So one of the great speakers of the time, James Weldon Johnson, May 1919, is one of the phenomena of human nature that once an opinion gets a popular start and becomes rooted in the mind of the public at large, it is next to impossible to uproot it or kill it off. It may be proved over and over again that the opinion was not entirely true, or even that it was entirely false, and the public at large will listen to the proof and go right on in believing the opinion as before. That is a masterstroke, and we see that after 9/11, no matter how much evidence you put before the public that this couldn't happen as it was said to have happened. The Kennedy assassination, it couldn't happen as it was said to have happened. Overwhelming piles of credible evidence, violations of the laws of science and physics. But still people will cling to this belief. And they won't let it go. It was Al-Qaeda, it was Oswald. One of the jurists at the time, Oliver Wendell Holmes, established a concept in his decision to take away your right to free speech called clear and present danger. So he said his law at the time, his Patriot Act, the Espionage Act, was okay. Was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court to take away your right to free speech because free speech was a clear and present danger to the government. How wrong he was. But people didn't give up and roll over and die. Ernst Freund wrote in popular journals at the time, a country can ill spare the men who, when waves of militant nationalism run high, do not lose the courage of their convictions. The peril resulting to the national cause from toleration of adverse opinions is largely imaginary. In any event, it is slight as compared with the permanent danger of intolerance to free institutions. And that's where he should have been sitting on the Supreme Court and not Oliver Wendell Holmes. Because the clear and present danger is the loss of rights and freedoms, not the control of them. And then a very popular attorney at the time, Harry Weinberger, who fought for the rights of the people who were arrested under all these horrendous laws, said, if liberty of speech and press is not to be permitted because Americans may too easily be converted from democracy, then Americans cannot be too well grounded in their ideals and cannot love liberty as much as we have been led to believe. Those were great men. Those were horrible times. They should not be repeated. Those words should ring. And then, just as we're looking at pictures, we see President Wilson being sworn in, a good Photoshop job because they put all these people in the background, making it look like they're watching him, but basically this is a wall of a photograph with them cut in on top. So the photographic manipulations go way back. We wonder if he actually, really and truly, swore the oath to uphold, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And then another quote from one of the bad guys. The doom of a nation can be averted only by a storm of flowing passion, but only those who are passionate themselves can arouse passion in others. Adolf Hitler. We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Albert Einstein. I've said that one before. It's very, very true. We had a drill last week, or maybe it's even going to 2 weeks now. But it's very important because this one involved the Russians. It was a cross-Arctic drill. It was called Watchful Eagle. Of course, this didn't really make it too much in our news. But at least the Russians reported it in detail, and we have it in detail here. It's about a hijacking of an aircraft going over the jurisdictions between Russia, the United States, and Canada with these people as participants. The Russian delegation were given complete access to the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs and a large segments of NORAD. And in time, as from this old movie, we may see some sort of conflict with the Russians as they master our skies. We let them fly across our skies here in Canada to take pictures of all our institutions so they could upgrade all their targeting and information that's quite obsolete, that goes back to the Cold War. Brilliant move here in Canada, this open skies policy. No one was the slightest bit suspicious. So it's just, you know, show us all out there, get the new satellite navigation system that the Russians have put together, their GPS system, aim here, shoot us through the heart. But we're afraid of Iran because maybe someday they'll have a nuclear weapon, even though everyone says they don't. And then Paul Allen's Octopussy, let's see if we can find that one. They got that on another page already. This is the submarine equipment he has on his yacht. This is something that rivals Jacques Cousteau. Allegedly, he's going to go down to HMS Hood, get the bell from this ship that was in a battle with the Bismarck off Iceland many, many long years ago, and restore it and return it. Of course, I know about the voyages of Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, who sailed long before Columbus, and reported land in those seas. So we see Great Britain here, and all sorts of lands between Greenland and Britain. These were shown in many other maps. 1477, Columbus talked about these islands, but Ptolemy stated in 1456 that there was an island totally destroyed in a massive volcanic eruption that wiped out these islands. So because these islands didn't exist in the modern era, or even the eras after Columbus, the Zeno brothers were discounted. But there is much clear evidence to say that these islands did exist. The most modern, of course, is now, I find a topographical map of explorers who were looking at the bottom, and that they found these river systems from an old landmass that is at the bottom of the ocean. And this is just absolutely phenomenal. So the A is where Hood sank. These islands or these ancient lands are in around this area too, and I get the feeling that's what Allen is really looking for. It's something more akin to Atlantis. But the stories of the Zeno brothers are quite interesting. This Journal of the North Atlantic is a very exceptional archaeological magazine. And when I was first reading about the Zeno brothers, I came across this picture, specifically Norse Greenland, which showed the structures and buildings that he described in his journals from many, many hundreds of years ago. He couldn't have known that unless he had seen it. He talked about an island off Greenland that had, as I recall, perhaps 50 hot springs that was denied in the Royal Geographic magazine, but are true. There were islands now today with that many and more hot springs on them. He was quite correct. He called this island Friesland, and there's probably other islands or things as well. And this is another Journal of the North Atlantic with that abandoned monastery that was discussed. Very, very interesting. How much of our history we've never been told by anyone. It's just like we're always kept in the dark for everything. It is horrendous, but part of it's our own fault because we choose not to find things out. We choose not to learn. We're happy with the status quo, and the status quo isn't good enough. I had the fortune or misfortune of listening to a shortwave show, Rick Wiles in the United States, a guy I used to listen to all the time when he did American Freedom News, a man who was just absolutely marvelous at dealing with alternative news issues. And he had on a CIA agent as his guest, at least they were upfront about it, and it just blew me away. Because, you know, here we have the people who bring out the Osama bin Laden fake story, and you have this woman demonizing Muslims, saying that they're infiltrating the United States, taking over the machinations of power and government, vilifying Iran, building up the logic for war to get us all going. And just realizing that this was a disinformation campaign. And it was very heartbreaking, because ultimately the truth is between good and evil. And one thing I have to take is Scripture at its word to say we're all sinners. Both sides are wrong. So when one comes to you and says that they're right, and we have to lay waste to all these other individuals because we're so right, well then I have to know that they're lying, because we can't be right. We're sinners too. We're just sinning in a different way. So that's why Christ told us to love one another and not slaughter and kill each other. But to have this CIA agent, probably a part of Operation Mockingbird as it's morphed, to take control of things like Genesis Network or alternative media, that's where they get their money from, I'm sure, because we sure don't get it here, as we see True News being taken advantage of. The guest speaker was Claire Lopez. She belongs to one of those think tanks that do all the thinking for us. The type of story is the baby in the incubator one, where they were talking about crucifying Coptic Christians in Egypt, which is not true. The National Post, for some of its weaknesses, said the story was fake. And here we are running with a fake story, even though we know it's full of holes, and pretending that it's true to get people aggravated so that they think they've been aggrieved, so they will respond with violence to hate, attack, and war with Muslim nations. It breaks your heart. Same thing happened with this so-called cleric in Pakistan who blamed a young Christian girl and put ashes of a burned Koran or something in her possession to say that she was committing blasphemy, even though the girl was, well, mentally retarded but slow and not exactly up to the 14-year level that she had aged. The big talk from the guest, Claire Lopez, is that the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated the United States government. And if it has offices in the United States government, it's because they work for them. The Muslim Brotherhood was an intelligence asset that goes way back to the times when the Nazis were fighting, and even before they were fighting in World War II, that they used these people. And then with Operation Paperclip, when we took all the Nazis out of Europe and Germany and brought them to America, we got the Muslim Brotherhood too. And this is a rendition of CIA, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, but that they distort the news and put out the information telling you about stuff. This is Claire Lopez. There's a documentary I've watched on the CIA that's just absolutely horrendous, crimes committed that just no sane man could understand how you do these things to another human being. 20,000 POWs killed in Vietnam. They put wooden dowel rods in their ears and just slowly hammered them in until they penetrated the skull and killed people. But that could take a long, long time if you're, it's like the death of 1,000 slices if you're really good at just tapping it very, very slowly. Throwing people out of helicopters, the classic CIA one. There was a picture of some of the victims. You know, beautiful couple, husband and wife taken up in the helicopter. They throw the woman out of the helicopter and then tell the husband to tell them what they want to know. Makes waterboarding look good. But this is the poison history that this woman represents, a 20-year career veteran of the CIA. You might as well bring in serial killers from the jails. So we don't do that kind of stuff here. That should be worth something to you. This woman worked for Hawkeye Systems, senior intelligence analyst, Chugach Systems Integration, where she's a senior intelligence analyst. Sound like CIA front companies. Hawkeye can make pictures turn in or morph into any picture. It is a very complex photographic technique that you could even film planes crashing into the World Trade Center and make it look a lot more real than you want it to. This Chugach company, they could be very well behind the collection of all your personal calls, emails, part of the new NSA vacuum cleaner sweep of information. And this woman starred in this movie Uranium, or was a guest in Uranium, a propaganda film to make us hate and want to go to war. And then in this classic little cartoon, we eavesdrop, we rendition, we torture, then we destroy all the evidence of any wrongdoing. Aren't you glad we're here to protect your freedom? That's the CIA. We're heading close to out of time. Unfortunately, time goes by so fast. But we like to stand up for the rights of people who have been marginalized and taken over. And we're doing a little bit on the shootings. One of the things that did come out in an article from Jim Stone was that he wrote a piece, a very controversial piece, that no one was killed in this shooting at the Aurora Theater. That's a hell of a thing to say, but I can't disagree with them when we look at some of the facts. One of the big facts is this blood trail is missing footprints in it, and it's almost impossible to create a massive blood trail like that without stepping in it. And he alleges that this was spilled as opposed to a fresh blood trail, and it's going in the wrong way. It's going to the theater as opposed to going away from the theater. Something very, very, very important in the forensic investigation. He wonders why the shooting was going on, that the police were making arrangements for the families and the press for photos, to come to the movie theater even, the place that is insecure and possibly dangerous, as opposed to going to the hospital. He suggests that they were doing a drill. And I can't disagree with him. Two of the victims hit the Social Security death index before the others, Jessica Redfield and Alexander Teves. He believes, and it's something that's been brought up before, that some of these alleged victims have been given new identities and paid off. There was a tweet from Jessica laughing about making people believe there is gunfire that he has recorded here. And I guess since we have a picture of it here, we might as well show it. So this individual here, Aaron, discusses, "You're a firecracker, loud, sparkly, and when in a gun barrel, able to make people think there's gunfire." And Jessica replies, "Boo, ha 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 ha." She was at the Toronto mass shooting event. The odds of being at a mass shooting event anywhere in Canada and the United States are approximately 1 in a 154,000 chance. The odds of being in a second one are 1 in 23 billion. Jessica talked in the weeks before her second shooting that she was moving to a new place with 7 swimming pools and a lake. Talking about a multi-million-dollar payout. All the victims from Aurora had a complete shutout of the first 50 hits on even small search engines, a memorial page on Facebook, a donation page in their honor. 2 people shut out in the first 10 hits on Google. At the Sikh shooting, no Facebook pages, but the Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, director Arm Kalika his father, was killed there. He was producing a movie, a disclosure movie about government corruption, stealing of energy technologies, and hidden contacts. He'd received numerous death threats that if he didn't stop producing the movie, the members of his family would be killed. So he is alleging, and I can't disagree with him, that this shooting at the Sikh Temple was arranged. He's suggesting that the nurse, who we believe was murdered as well, at the Aurora shooting, may have heard something from someone speaking about the fact that they were killed somewhere else and brought to the hospital. Or if they were alive, that they said that they were someplace else when they were shot. And she knew full up. Holmes's father was to testify on this LIBOR scandal before Congress. Now that we're fighting for his life, more or less, in a capital offense, father may be more amenable not to reveal or divulge certain facts. He makes mention of the fact that 9 of the hijackers on 9/11 were alive later, one of those little facts that don't change opinion. Representatives from our own government flew to Egypt and apologized on national television for the screw-up. None of the supposed hijackers were on the boarding logs for the airplanes. There was no record of them having bought tickets. 19 hijackers, and 9 of them were found alive. Where did the other ones go if they were not on the planes? Well, maybe they got one of those places where you get lots of money and a whole bunch of swimming pools. The whole concept of a lot of these false flag operations are to save the bankers, shut down the release of important information, serving the purpose of banning or restricting guns with effective use in propaganda. This is the movie that they were making serious. We'll show the clip for this. And
what people need to understand is the secrecy around UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence really has nothing to do with ETs. It has to do with humans and the power that is resting in large corporations and financial interests that do not want you to know the truth. And here it is. The truth is that not only are we not alone, but that for 100 years, the advanced sciences and technologies dating back to the time of Tesla, Faraday, T. Townsend Brown, and others have had technologies that would liberate the world from the slavery of our current macroeconomic system.
We were impressed when we came upon Dr. Greer and his brilliant team. They've been working on groundbreaking ideas over the past decade and pushing a truth that not many people either know about or are scared to discuss. So we thought to ourselves, this is a ripe topic to document and expose in a film. After contacting Dr. Greer, we found out he had bigger and better plans.
This is a film that is the culmination of 22 years of research and discovery and journey in space and time and consciousness, and it's going to be the most significant release of information on the UFO subject and new energy that has ever occurred.
The documentary film is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's a crucial step towards moving forward and finding new technology and lifting the veil of secrecy blinding the masses.
There's a lot of talk about 2012. Well, this is the year for this to happen. But it isn't about the end of the world. It's about the end of an old and corrupt order in the world and the beginning of an entirely new civilization on Earth. And that civilization on Earth will be one that has free energy, abundance, social justice, and interplanetary capabilities.
We need all of your support. The main corporate media will not cover this story. Not even places like NPR, or PBS, or BBC. This is why we, the people, are going to make this film. The internet is our home. Each person is going to co-produce this with us. It'll be funded by all of us together. It'll be distributed by all of us together. We want to have 1,000 screenings, events, and premieres. But this is an undertaking that requires a large group of people. So please spread the word.
I hope you will help us. I hope you will join us. I hope you will network this information of this campaign to raise the funds for this film to everyone on your email list, every organization you know, because the time, frankly, is short. Everyone on Earth knows that we cannot live with 7 billion people burning oil and gas and coal. Most of the public know that we're not alone and that the UFOs are real. More than half the public know this. And yet, what are we doing about it? Our State Department isn't making peaceful contact, so we must. Our Department of Energy is not funding non-classified projects dealing with these science and technology, so we must. And certainly the Pentagon is not disclosing this information, and therefore we must. So this returns this whole issue to perhaps where it should be, and that's us, we the people. And not just the people of America or of Europe, but of Africa and India and China. Every man, woman, and child on Earth has a stake in this. The disclosure of this information will enable us to move forward as a people with all the science and technology that we need to have thousands of years of abundance and peace on this planet. This is really what this is about, and I hope you will help us. Thank you very much.
Well, that looks like an awesome film. Unfortunately, it's a film bathed in blood because one of the originators of this film had his father killed in this horrible Sikh Temple massacre. So we see this was a false flag of the New World Order. They want to keep us silent. It's like he said in this documentary, it's we the people. You are we the people. We are we the people. The big shadowy corporations just want to keep us under the thumb. You can change that. You can change the channel. You can come to that channel. You can come to Conspiracy Cafe. We will reveal what we can reveal. We will tell you what we can tell you. Everything. And let you decide for yourselves what to do with it and where to go with it. We appreciate any and all the help that you can give us. Support this show. Support this network. Do something while you can. Everything you do can hold off or alleviate a terrible future. These people have given their lives in their work and in the blood sacrifice of the loss of a father to get out a very important piece of information to the benefit of we the people. We try to do that here to the best of our abilities. Your abilities can help us along. So until we're back Tuesday next week, this is Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. This is that channel, the one and only, here at Bay and Dundas, with the help of Aaron and Randy, doing the best we can to get something across to you to change the world for the better. Thanks for coming out. Good night.